Well, this is a new one that I haven't experienced. That's our first indoor snake. Rearranging the shop, take 27. Now that is much better. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. I have to say, this is the first time in quite a while that I feel like there's actually some room to accomplish something in the shop again. It is starting to look awful clean and organized in here. Just don't look behind you. See, I told you not to look behind you. I mean, as you've seen, we have been getting some things done, but it's been a bit of a cluster. But like I told you last time, I'm working on it. We're getting there. I'm just working on it at Joe's pace, though. We even got rid of the daycare UFC ring. Well, I guess we technically didn't get rid of it, but a little more on that guy later. Today's video is going to be about this V10 diesel and this 1-ton axle. Mainly about the fact that they're in the frickin' way. So it's time to handle that. It's gonna involve a little bit of fabrication and making some use of that gantry crane. We're gonna level up our storage capabilities, pun intended. So we got this 800-pound V10 twin turbo diesel that we're saving for a rainy day, a fun project down the road. But down the road means it can't sit right in the middle of the shop. It kind of buggers things up being there. So we need to come up with a little bit of a solution for that, along with a couple sets of axles that I'd like to get off the ground as well. Especially one of the sets is on the ground outside in the grass. Rather have it inside in the air. And we don't necessarily have a forklift, nor do we really have the room to add one. So after mulling a few things over on the best way to store those guys, I think I've come up with a nice solution. We are going to use that gantry crane and our own little take on what I guess you would call shipping racks that a lot of manufacturing facilities use. They're going to be lost cause racks, though, where all my parts go to die. So we got some steel tube, some steel rectangles left over from a previous project, and these. These right here, I believe, are a very crucial part to this project. That is right, more casters. I just realized they sent the frickin' wrong ones. I ordered the same set as we used on the gantry crane, which is 4 swivels, 2 brakes, 2 swivels with brakes, and 2 fixed ones. I've had these sitting here for like a month or two. Probably would have been wise to open them up earlier. Once again, I'm my own worst enemy. But no, we'll be able to make do with these, and worst case scenario, we can swap them out for the correct ones later on. But I do believe wheels are a very critical thing in a shop that is not quite as big as you wish you had. Now, my shop is 1,440 square feet, which I feel is on the small side. Coming from what was a 4,500 square foot shop that we had, we just have to be a bit more efficient working in here. If a guy planned ahead and had dry erase markers for his dry erase board, I'd sit here and draw out what I'm going to build today. But instead, you'll just have to follow along and watch me as I do it. Essentially, what we're going to build today is a series of stacking racks, with the bottom set having wheels. We'll use the gantry crane to stack them, the wheels to roll them where we need to be. First thing we need to do is make sure we build one big enough for this. We are about 32 inches at the widest point there, and front to back, we'll call that 28 inches. An overall height of 31. So that puts us at 32 inches wide, 28 inches deep, 31 inches tall. I do believe that this V10 diesel with twin overhead cam cylinder heads is going to be about the biggest lump of an engine that we will ever store. So this guy is a safe bet to build for our maximum dimensions on an engine cart. So we have 3 of these guys set aside for today's project, and these will make up what is the base of our little racks. And the 2-inch square tube here will make our uprights. And we grabbed our 1.25 inch stuff to build out our mounts and whatnot so we can secure things inside the racks. So with 3 of them, my plans are to have 1 for an engine, and then we got a couple sets of axles. We have a front and rear 1-ton axle set up for the Range Rover camper. I want to place 2 of those on a rack. Then we have a few sets of Disco 1 axles, and I want to get another rack set up for 2 of those. And we'll start with that to see how this all works out. What's nice is this is very expandable, and these casters are rated at 4,000 pounds for the set of them, so we can throw some weight on it if need be. All right, so we need to make sure we clear 32 inches on the inside of this. These are 44 inches wide, 27 inches deep, or this way, That means our engine will potentially hang out about a 1/2 inch front and rear, which does not matter. We just need to make sure we can fit within the uprights, which it looks like we should be able to do. So the bottom rack is going to have the casters on it. We want the heaviest thing to be the base, but the rest of them are going to stack on top of this rack. And I'll show you a little bit later exactly how that's gonna work out, but they're essentially gonna index onto each other. So the tube needs to go through this base so that it can index onto the rack below it. So I think the best bet for strength and repeatability is to have the tube come through something like this, where we leave a little bit of that inside bend and just slice out, and this will just slide in. We'll be able to weld it all the way around. Should be nice and sturdy. We'll be right on the bend, which will be strong, and then we also won't cut all the way through, which makes the repeatability of this for future editions much easier. I think what we'll do here is take our straight edge and then let's pick a number to come in off the outer tube. We'll do 2 1/4 and see how that lands. So if we go 2 1/4, 2 1/4, make a line like that, 2 1/4, 2 1/4. We'll cut out this little V-notch there. The tube will sit like that and slide right on through, and we'll be able to have enough meat on the inside here to do a nice gusset. But I think that's a ticket. So to cut those little notches out, we could use an angle grinder with cutoff wheel, maybe a Sawzall, maybe a jigsaw. But I think our easiest solution is going to be our little portaband with the swag off-road stand. That actually wasn't too bad. We got one of them down. The tube will slide in just like that. That should work out pretty swell. Nice little surface area to weld all the way around. And it even looks like they match. So being we used Merlin to pick the steel up, we had our local little steel mart chop it into a much more manageable size. And now we can work from there. Well, that's not supposed to do that. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. So we got them all chopped down to size now. You can see we have 3 different heights. This is going to be the engine one, this is the 1-ton axle one, and this is the top one for the smaller Discovery axles. We're probably not going to stack higher than 3, but if need be, this will still work. And on the stacking part come these. These are kind of the critical component to make this thing all work. These are what are called stacking caps. I got these from McMaster-Carr. I'll put a link down below. But these get welded on the top of the tubes like so. And then what you can do is set them right on, and that indexes into the bottom of the tube. They also have targets, as they're called, that are a little wider flange that make this a little bit easier, but we will rock it without it. And that keeps the tube sitting on top so it doesn't slip off. Unfortunately, in typical Joe fashion, I frickin' messed up again. I have one of these misplaced somewhere when I was measuring everything out. So the top one's gonna get 3 for now, till I find the lost one. We'll put Sasha on the hunt. So we got all the ones we can get done. Smoking hot. Kind of cool looking. Got a couple lazy dogs too. Apparently Yuki doesn't want to lay on the pillow. So having this bent square tubing as the base creates a little bit of a unique challenge, as you can't stick our little speed square on the tube itself, because on the bend this top edge rolls up. Therefore, that's not accurate. So we have a flat spot in the concrete floor, and we are going to go off that to make sure our uprights are in the correct position. On the next ones, the tube will actually extend past the base, but being we're putting the casters on, I want these flush because the caster plate's going to go somewhere in that area. I kind of forgot how sweet this little Hobart Handler 140 welds out. Most of the time around here, I'm TIGging everything. And if we do get the MIG out, I usually use the bigger one. This guy we mainly use for repairing exhaust and whatnot. But that guy's a nice little welder. Let's see if we can do this without making it too much of a cluster. So on all the upper ones, we're gonna let 2 inches of the tube hang below, I believe. Maybe we'll do an inch. Let's do 1.5 inches. We'll split the difference. So what I'm gonna do is mark out 2 inches, or 1.5 inches, because I said 1.5 inches. So we got them all marked out, 1.5 inches above the bottom frame. Will sit there. What I think I'm gonna do is clamp a bar across each end, and then we can just set this right on those bars and square everything up that way. It's never the right distance. See, that should make things much easier. So this is the type of things you need to do when you don't have 3 hands. I was only born with 2. Don't fall. I'll get it right this time. That 3rd hand would be frickin' fantastic right at the moment. Well, this clamp's too heavy. All right, we're gonna go and do this. All right, this is becoming a clock. We need this one to tip back. All right, now we'll try and stick the thing in there and square it all up. In my head, that was working way better. So what did we learn about that last idea? It wasn't a very good one. So we're gonna go back and do it somewhat like we did the original one, except I'm spacing the bottom frame up with some square tube. So that'll give us the correct distance, and it should be less cumbersome, and maybe I won't injure myself. Vermont, but it's a season of sticks and There you have an idea what we're going with now. Obviously we'll have casters on this one, axles in that one, but these stacking caps sure make life easy tossing stuff on top of each other. These bottom 4 posts pulled in a little bit when we welded them, so we'll dial that back out when we put our gussets in. That's an easy enough fix. So now we just rinse and repeat for the last one. Not half bad. You know, besides that one missing. These are pretty sturdy as is, but now we're gonna cut some gussets out, tie the uprights into the base a little bit more, along with the caster plates for the bottom. And maybe some pieces to make moving this stuff around a little bit easier. Alright, so we have our last little bit to cut, for now at least, and this stuff is 3/8 of an inch. And that'll be the thickest that I have used on this particular table. Maybe it'll work. We only have a 45 amp plasma machine, so this is kind of on the upper end of what it's gonna like to do. I mean, I think we should be able to do 1/2 inch ultimately, but we'll see how this goes. We had a little mishap on that one there, but the rest of them are what I like to call halfway decent. We just need one more set of those. So the 3/8 actually had a pretty respectable cut quality. Only problem is, as you can see, that comes with a boatload of slag on the bottom side. But that there is a product of the fact that it has to move pretty freaking slow when it's only cutting at 45 amps. For instance, this 1/8 inch cuts at about 150 inches per minute. The 3/16 here cuts at 85, and the 3/8, 12. So less than 10% of the speed of this. The good news with this is that slag pops right off. Tap it with a hammer, and there's not going to be a whole lot of cleanup. So went ahead and bent up all our gussets, and those will sit something like that. And that'll add just a little bit of triangulation without stepping too far into our storage area. Realistically, it would do fine without these. So it's just a tiny bit of added strength. I knew we were getting close. It was starting to feed a little wonky. You probably heard it there at the end, not being as smooth. A smart guy would just use the big MIG, but I kind of like exercising this one for the first time in a while. It's been welding so nicely. Well, we went ahead and did the smart thing and got the big MIG out. We'll be welding these 3/8 pieces on later, so we're going to need it anyways. So one of the pieces that we cut were our caster plates. These are what we'll use to bolt the wheels onto the bottom rack that's going to hold the V10. These are going to be pretty simple. They are going to sit somewhere in this vicinity. So we'll have access to all the bolt holes while still tying the bottom frame into the uprights. And then with the casters kind of centered over the uprights, all the load from the racks stacked on top of this one will be transferred straight down through to the wheels themselves. That's at least what I'm going for in theory. This all could be an epic failure. See, I applied and was accepted for engineering school, but didn't actually go. Getting pretty good at flipping these guys around. We'll let all those guys cool off. Then we can put some wheels on and get this thing rolling. I'm feeling like we're building some tables. Got a bar height, normal height one, and a cocktail table. Or a coffee table. I don't actually know the difference. And once again, we flip. Keeps getting heavier each time. That's nice. We're so frickin' mobile now. So now it's time to get this thing sitting over the cart. We're gonna have to make a couple mounts. So here's the point where the gantry crane that we built earlier comes into play. Now we obviously need to mate the V10 to the cart. That's where these pieces that we cut out earlier come into handy. We tacked a nut on the backside. We got 2 of them, and those are gonna go right to the engine mount. So what we need to do is come up with a measurement for our downward tubes that'll get welded onto some cross braces. Figure out our lowest point here, and we got 10 inches. So we got 9 inches. 9 inches. 10 inches. Still a little hot. So now we can kind of set this guy in place. How's that look? I think we'll go there with that one. So what I'm gonna do is tack one side of the crossbars in place first, and that'll be easier to kind of line everything up and get the other side in. And of course, somehow, there's always more to leak out, especially from a Volkswagen. I think I'm happy with how it's sitting right there. I'm not exactly happy with how much it's leaking up front. We're gonna end up making something on the backside here, probably a strap that just goes to one of the bell housing bolts, just to keep it from rocking back and forth. The mounts are obviously gonna handle the bulk of the weight. It's just gonna be a little tippy. So there's our little setup for the rear. So now it's time to yank this guy off there one last time so we can weld it out. That's the last time we should need that for a bit, because this thing is just gonna roll around now. Now that's not too terrible for nearly 900 pounds sitting there. So now we're gonna move on to the 1-ton axles. Those are the next stack in the Jenga tower. So what I wanna do is find center on this so we can evenly load it, which would put us 26.5, so that's right around center there. So what we're gonna do on this guy is cut up a bunch of these for underneath the axle tubes. That's what's gonna rest on there. So now we just need to do some measuring to figure out whereabouts we'll line those up. Once again, not quite enough hands. But hey, as always, we made it happen. Now we just need to figure out these guys. That's from the Risco Disco. The front one probably won't be too bad. The rear is gonna be a bit interesting to pull in because it is welded up on the inside, which means it's not gonna turn. And it's currently like 95 degrees out with 130% humidity. It'll be fun. Starting to get wore out though. My Chariot has arrived. So I lied. The rear one ended up being easier. The brakes are locked up on the front one. So you may not just see that this video. So as you can see by this operation right here, that ain't gonna happen by myself. So on the rack for the 1-ton axles, we have our location marked out on where we want our little V cradles to sit. But for all of it to clear and not just bang off everything on the frame, we're gonna have to space these up. So we got some more 1¼ square tube that will go like that. But just setting and welding the angle on the top like that isn't quite kosher in my book. So you're probably finally getting the picture of what's going on. The axle tubes are going to cradle right into those. We got them offset a tiny bit. My gloves looking a little rough. These aren't exactly welding gloves. Smart guy would stick those on. You guys all know that I have never claimed to be smart though, so there's that. But this rack is just about done. We have one last thing to do, and that is our lift points. We are gonna weld those like that. These are the 3/8 inch pieces that we cut out on the plasma earlier. They have a hole for either a hook or a chain. Instead of cutting a new one, we're just gonna pop a hole in this guy with the drill press. We are starting to reach some new heights, but no, we have the 1-ton rack sitting on top of the engine. You can see our lift points are there, our cradles are there. All that's left to do is to get that and that on there. So these lift points are really the key to this setup. The initial loading, they aren't as critical, but from here on out, anytime we want to move any of these around, we can just do a 4-point lift up to the gantry crane and pick individual ones off, and extending the tube down past the bottom of the frame was so we can grab this with a forklift if need be as well. Multi-purpose. Now here is the real moment of truth as to whether this thing actually works as I designed it. Like I said earlier, not an engineer, just play one on YouTube. Poorly at that. and we're sitting in there pretty nicely. So I was just doing a little bit of thinking, and sometimes I'm a little bit slow to come to the correct decision on what to do, but I was just looking at the front axle here, and this is going to go onto the Range Rover camper eventually, which means we'll have to chop most of the bracketry off this guy. So before I go ahead and stick it on the rack with the rear axle, I think we're going to do that. And in the interest of not holding you up anymore, we're going to move on with this and get the Discovery axle sitting on the rack and this guy tucked away. You can see that we went ahead and got our cradles and lift points all welded on there, and I even found our other little stacking cap. I told you I'd find it. Land Rover went ahead and put this nice little lift point right in the center of the axle. Now I wouldn't use that to actually lift it too high off the ground. Usually you want to strap further out on something like this, but being we are literally lifting it far enough off the ground to go on there, I think we'll be all right. That one fits in there nice and snug as well. And now we'll lift that whole little cart and get it put on top. Now, ratchet straps aren't exactly the correct way to lift this, but what I'm gonna do now is use those to get the length I need to make 4 different chains at. So we're gonna do a little test bed to see what works best. So this is a do as I say, not as I do. Ratchet straps are not lifting devices. Definitely not. Except for now, but never. Well, this is a new one that I haven't experienced in the shop quite yet. That's our first indoor snake, and there he goes. I don't actually know what to do with this. Expert snake wrangler. So there is the finished product. We are going to leave this guy in bare steel. It's sitting inside what is going to be a climate controlled building, so it's not going to rust, and then that leaves us the ability to make modifications to fit whatever we need to in the future. Eventually the V10 is going to be in something, so we can replace that with a different engine, but I do think that is going to work out well to declutter a little bit of the shop and keep it a tad bit more organized. We all know I need as much help as I can get in that department. That won't be the final resting spot, but it is sure nice to not have that V10 sitting right in the middle of the first bay here. Being this guy worked out as well as expected, I think I'm going to make another set of 3. We have the Callaway engine, a couple other engines, a couple other axles, so we have plenty of stuff that we can throw in the air and clear out a little more floor space. And I'm super happy with how well that actually rolls around, being that's probably 1,600 plus pounds sitting there. A little bit of rearranging and stuffing a couple of these along the back wall. It's gonna make a big difference around here. Coming up next on the shop, I think we're gonna tackle stairs and start sorting out the actual finished product of the mezzanine. But with that being said, I appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing. This was kind of a fun one. I love doing little projects like this, especially when they come in handy and make our little Land Rover shop that much nicer to work in. And I guess now is as good a time as any to clue you in as to what happened with the little daycare ring. So every once in a while, I miss on purchasing something that I think I could resell. This is one of them. This is that daycare UFC Octagon. I invested a ton at $3.45, but it seems like it's just not something anyone wants. We need the room, and we also need a bench. So we're gonna repurpose this. I think that'll work out, in my head at least. Then we can also use the plexi and the laser. That'll work out too. So now we're left with a pile of stuff to make something happen with. I'm not sure what to do with all these things. If you got any ideas for some like 2-inch by 1-inch wooden dowels, I'm all ears. A lot of screws, a Sasha, a couple whiteboards, a bunch of plexiglass. So at least I think I got our $3.45 worth. More work than I wanted to do, but that's the way she goes. So we got the joiner out so we can make some sawdust. But no, all these 2x4s are gonna be the top of our workbench. So I went ahead and planed off the rounded edge on one side. So that way, when we sandwich these together, there won't be this gap. It'll be nice and tight. So we got the bench top flipped upside down, and I went ahead and drilled out a couple of the holes here. And what we're gonna do is grab some wood glue and smear it together, and then with those holes drilled through, we're gonna sandwich it and suck it all together, and that'll hold it nice and solid. I don't have a paintbrush out here, so we're gonna use a rag to kind of smear this over. That seems like the correct way to do this. I think we're gonna make a mess. Ah, son of a bitch. That was the wrong way. So now we'll thread this guy through. And we're probably squeezing some glue right onto the concrete floor. It's kind of heavy. We got a little on the floor. It'll clean up easy though. The floor is much due for a scrubbing. Maybe we'll put you on that task, Sasha. If we wanted, that right there could be our finished bench. But I think what we'll do is grab the belt sander and knock the top a little more flat. And then we're also going to take some of our top cap pieces from that daycare set and face everything. See, this has all these holes drilled. So even though it's repurposed using recycled stuff, we're gonna make it look nice and finished. So we'll kind of wrap this all the way around. And then we're also going to put a shelf across the bottom here. That's gonna do two things. Add some much needed storage space, and then it's also gonna tie all the legs together on a different plane and sturdy this thing up quite a bit. And for that, we're also going to reuse more of the daycare stuff. We're gonna chop apart the floor. It's 3/4 inch MDF, which means Sasha's gonna have to eventually move, even though she looks pretty frickin' comfy. That'll work nicely across the bottom on those supports there. This is frickin' stout though. I want a nice sturdy bench to be able to hammer some stuff on, and for this frickin' behemoth. So not a bad little side quest using $3.45 worth of material. I guess I had to buy the wood glue and the all thread. So I think we got like $12 into this with a whole bunch still left over. And here is the finished product. We got it all faced up and it sure looks mighty nice in there. Did a little rearranging. We also finally hung the quick jacks. Told you I'm working on it.